The morning sun cast long shadows across New Terra Colony as 8-year-old Maya Chen skipped through the market square, her small hands clutching a basket of fresh vegetables for her grandmother. The colony had been peaceful for 3 years. Now, ever since the humans first settled on this distant world, Maya didn't know about the tensions building in the galaxy, or that alien eyes watched their every move from the dark spaces between stars. Above the colony, cloaked ships from the Zephyrian Empire hung like silent predators. Commander Vextar studied the human settlement through his tactical display, his 4 eyes narrowing with disgust. These soft pink creatures had dared to claim a world in Zephyrian space without permission. Worse, they had thrived where his own people had failed to establish a foothold for centuries. The humans must be taught their place, Vextar growled to his second-in-command. Deploy the Kithara. The Kithara was the pride of the Zephyrian military, a bioengineered warbeast standing 12 feet tall at the shoulder. Its 6 legs ended in razor-sharp claws that could slice through steel. Armor plating covered its muscular body, and its elongated skull housed a brain modified for pure aggression. The creature had trampled entire armies across a dozen worlds. No enemy had ever survived an encounter with the Kithara. Maya hummed a simple tune as she walked, unaware that death descended from the clouds above. The transport ship materialized just outside the colony's defensive perimeter, its landing creating a small crater in the red earth. The Kithara emerged with a sound like thunder, its massive form casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the light itself. The colony's alarms began to wail. Adults shouted for children to run to the shelters. But Maya was too far from safety, caught in the open market square as panic erupted around her. She turned toward the commotion and saw something that made her small heart skip a beat. The war beast charged toward the colony with earth-shaking steps, its red eyes locked onto the scattering humans, and Maya could see the alien satisfaction in its predatory gaze. She should have been terrified. Any reasonable child would have screamed and run. But Maya Chen was not like other children. Instead of fear, Maya felt something else entirely, a deep, inexplicable sadness. As the Kithara thundered closer, she could sense something hidden beneath its rage. The creature's mind touched hers across the distance, and she gasped at what she found there. Pain, confusion, loneliness. The war beast wasn't evil. It was suffering. Maya dropped her basket and began walking toward the charging monster. Behind her, her mother's voice screamed her name. Security forces raised their weapons, but they couldn't fire with Maya in the way. The little girl moved with purpose, her small feet carrying her directly into the path of the most dangerous predator in known space. The Kithara saw the tiny human approaching and felt a moment of confusion. Its programming demanded that it crush all humans, but something about this small being made it hesitate. The creature's charge slowed as Maya came within 20 meters, then 10, then 5. Maya stopped just beyond the reach of the beast's claws and looked up into its burning red eyes. "You're hurt," she said simply, her voice barely audible over the creature's heavy breathing. The Kithara reared back on its hind legs, preparing to strike. Its massive claws gleamed in the sunlight as it prepared to end this strange little human's life. But as Maya continued to stare into its eyes without fear, something unprecedented happened. The war beast remembered. Before the surgeries and the conditioning, before the armor and the weapons grafted to its flesh, the Kithara had been something else. A peaceful creature that had lived in the crystal forests of the Zephyrian homeworld, a being capable of joy and companionship, before its mind had been twisted into a weapon of war. Maya saw these memories flashing through the creature's consciousness. She saw the pain of the surgeries, the confusion of the mental conditioning, the loneliness of a life spent in isolation between battles. Tears began to flow down her small cheeks. "They hurt you," she whispered. "They changed you into something you never wanted to be." The Kithara's massive head lowered until it was level with Maya's face. Its breath was hot against her skin, and she could see her reflection in its alien eyes. For a moment, predator and child simply stared at each other in perfect understanding. Around them, the world had gone silent. Colonists watched in amazement from behind cover. Even the Zephyrian observers in their ships above couldn't understand what they were seeing. Their perfect weapon of war had stopped mid-attack to have a conversation with a human child. Maya slowly raised her hand and placed it against the armored plating above the creature's snout. The metal was warm to the touch, and she could feel the rapid beating of the beast's heart beneath the artificial shell. "You don't have to do what they made you for," she said softly. "You can choose to be something different." The Kithera's eyes closed at her touch. For the first time in years, the constant pain in its modified brain began to fade. The rage that had been artificially amplified started to quiet. Deep in its consciousness, the creature's original personality began to stir, like a flower opening after a long winter. When the war beast opened its eyes again, they were no longer the burning red of artificial aggression. Instead, they showed the deep blue of its natural state, curious, intelligent, and gentle. The transformation rippled through the creature's body. The tension in its muscles relaxed. Its claws retracted slightly into their sheaths. For the first time since its modification, the Kithera looked around its environment with wonder rather than hostility. Maya smiled up at her new friend. She didn't fully understand what had happened, but she knew that everything had changed. The monster was gone, replaced by the being it had always been meant to be. Above them, Commander Vextar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His perfect weapon had been neutralized by a child's touch, but the implications of what he was witnessing went far beyond military concerns. If a human child could undo years of conditioning with simple empathy, what else might these strange beings be capable of? The silence stretched across the colony square like a held breath. Maya kept her small hand pressed against the Kithera's armored snout, feeling the creature's heartbeat slow from its frenzied pace to something more natural. Around them, hundreds of colonists emerged slowly from their hiding places, their faces showing mixtures of awe, confusion, and lingering fear. Maya, her mother, Dr. Sarah Chen, broke from the crowd and ran toward her daughter, but she stopped short when the Kithera's massive head turned toward her, those strange blue eyes studying her with obvious intelligence. "It's okay, Mom," Maya said without turning around. "He's not angry anymore. He's just sad and tired." Dr. Chen had spent years studying alien biology, but nothing in her education had prepared her for this moment. The creature before her was clearly a bioweapon. She could see the surgical scars where armor had been grafted to living flesh, the ports where neural interfaces had been installed. Yet her daughter stood beside it as casually as she might pet a neighborhood dog. Colonel Marcus Webb, the colony's military commander, approached with careful steps. His hand rested on his sidearm, but he made no move to draw it. Years of combat experience told him that any aggressive action might restart the creature's violent programming. "Maya," he said gently, "I need you to step away from the creature." Very slowly, the Kithera's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, and its head swiveled toward the colonel. For a moment, Webb thought he saw a flicker of the old aggression return to those alien eyes. But Maya's voice cut through the tension. "No, don't move away," she said, addressing the creature directly. "He's not going to hurt you. None of us are. We're not like the ones who changed you." The war beast settled back onto its haunches, its massive form still towering over the gathered humans. But the aggressive stance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost curious. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her scientific mind overriding her maternal instincts. "Maya, can you communicate with it?" "Sort of," Maya replied, still maintaining contact with the creature. "I can feel what he's feeling. He's been alone for so long, Mom. They kept him in a dark place between battles, and they never let him remember who he used to be." Above them, the Zephyrian ships remained cloaked but active. Commander Vextar paced his bridge in growing agitation. His superiors had given him explicit orders: demonstrate human weakness by having their ultimate weapon crush a defenseless human child in full view of the colony. The psychological impact would break their resistance and make occupation simple. Instead, he was watching his billion-credit bioweapon having what appeared to be a therapy session. "Commander," his communications officer reported, "High Command is requesting an immediate status update." Vextar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. How could he explain that a human child had somehow undone years of conditioning with a simple touch? His career would be over. Worse, he would likely face execution for failure. "Tell them the weapon is assessing the situation," he replied finally. "Beginning psychological warfare protocols. It wasn't entirely a lie. What was happening below was certainly psychological, though not in the way Command intended. In the colony square, Maya had begun to walk around the Kithara, her small hands tracing the edges of the armor plating grafted to its skin. The creature followed her movements with its head, making soft sounds that seemed almost conversational. "The metal hurts him," Maya announced to the watching crowd. "It's too tight and it makes his thoughts fuzzy. There are machines inside his head that make him angry all the time." Dr. Chen knelt beside her daughter, studying the creature's construction with professional interest. The bioengineering was incredibly sophisticated, living tissue seamlessly integrated with mechanical components. But she could see what Maya meant. The armor plating showed signs of chronic inflammation where it met living flesh. Maya asked him, "Does he want us to help remove some of this?" The little girl looked up at the Kithara, and something passed between them that the adults couldn't quite understand. The creature made a low rumbling sound that might have been agreement. "He says yes, but he's scared. The machines in his head tell him that humans are supposed to hurt him, but he can feel that we're different from the ones who made him this way." Colonel Webb found himself in an unprecedented situation. Every military protocol told him to evacuate the civilians and neutralize the threat. But the threat had apparently neutralized itself, and his evacuation order was being ignored by a crowd of scientists and medical personnel who were now treating this as the discovery of the century. "Dr. Chen," he said finally, "if you're seriously considering attempting to remove alien military hardware from a living weapon, we need to move this to a secure location." "Agreed," Sarah Chen replied, never taking her eyes off the Kithara. "Maya, can you convince him to come with us to the medical facility?" Maya nodded and spoke softly to the creature in that strange, wordless communication they seemed to share. The Kithara rose to its feet with surprising grace for something so large, and began to follow the small girl toward the colony's research complex. The procession that made its way through New Terra's streets was unlike anything in human history. A little girl led a massive alien war beast through crowds of colonists who had emerged from their shelters to witness the impossible. Children pointed and whispered. Adults took cautious photos and videos that would soon spread across human space. But it was the creature's behavior that truly amazed the witnesses. The Kithara moved with careful deliberation, clearly aware of its size and strength relative to the fragile humans around it. When a small child dropped a toy in its path, the war beast delicately stepped around the object, then used the tip of one claw to gently push the toy back toward its young owner. In the medical facility, Dr. Chen and her team began the most unusual examination of their careers. The Kithara lay on a specially reinforced table, its massive form filling most of the room. Maya sat beside its head, maintaining the physical contact that seemed to keep the creature calm. "The neural interfaces are incredibly complex," Dr. Chen murmured as she studied the scans. "It's not just behavioral conditioning. They've physically altered its brain chemistry. The aggression isn't just programmed, it's chemically enforced." "Can you fix it?" Maya asked, her young voice carrying a weight of concern that seemed far too mature for her years. "I don't know, sweetheart. This is beyond anything we've ever attempted. We'd need weeks just to understand the basic systems, and attempting to remove or disable the wrong component could—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Maya understood. They could accidentally kill him while trying to help. The Kithara made a soft sound and shifted its massive head to look directly at Dr. Chen. In its blue eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch: intelligence, awareness, and what could only be described as gratitude. "He knows the risks," Maya translated. "He says that even if you can't fix everything, just knowing that someone wants to help him is more than he's had in years." Dr. Chen felt tears sting her eyes. In all her years of research, she had never encountered anything like this. A being that had retained its essential nature despite everything that had been done to it. "We'll try," she promised, both to the creature and to her daughter. "Whatever it takes, we'll try." Above them, Commander Vextar finally made his decision. He couldn't explain the situation to High Command, but he could certainly end it. If the Kithara wouldn't follow its programming, then it had become a liability rather than an asset. "Prepare the orbital bombardment systems," he ordered his crew. "Target the medical facility. Sir, our own asset is in that building. The asset has been compromised. It's expendable." As the Zephyrian weapons powered up, Maya suddenly lifted her head from the examination table. Something had changed in the air around them. a feeling of imminent danger that she couldn't quite explain. "They're coming," she whispered. "The ones who hurt him. They're angry that he won't fight anymore." The colony's defense systems screamed to life as energy readings spiked in the atmosphere above New Terra. Colonel Webb's communicator crackled with urgent reports from the sensor stations scattered around the settlement. Multiple hostile contacts decloaking overhead. Energy weapons charging. "All civilians to emergency shelters immediately. Orbital bombardment imminent." But in the medical facility, Maya refused to move from the Cathera's side. The massive creature had begun to tremble, not from fear but from the conflict raging in its modified brain. The approaching Zephyrian ships were broadcasting override commands, trying to reactivate its combat programming. "They're trying to make him angry again," Maya said, pressing both hands against the creature's armored head. "I can feel the machines in his brain getting louder." Dr. Chen worked frantically at her scanner, trying to isolate the neural interface frequencies. "If I can disrupt the signal somehow." The Kithra's eyes flickered between blue and red as the override commands grew stronger. Its muscles tensed, and for a moment Dr. Chen thought they were about to lose everything they had gained. But Maya's voice cut through the technological noise. "No," she said firmly, staring directly into the creature's eyes. "You're not their weapon anymore. You're your own person. You choose what you want to be." Above them, Commander Vextar grew impatient with his override attempts. "The human contamination runs deeper than anticipated," he reported to his bridge crew. "Begin bombardment sequence. Level that building." The first energy blast struck New Terra's planetary shield, causing the entire dome to flicker with absorbed energy. The colony's defensive barriers were designed to handle meteor impacts and solar storms, not military-grade weapons. They wouldn't hold for long. In the medical facility, the lights flickered as power was diverted to the shields. The Cathera's internal conflict reached a breaking point as the override signals intensified. Its massive frame began to convulse, caught between its artificial programming and its newfound freedom. "Maya, get back," Colonel Webb shouted as he burst into the room. "The creature's destabilizing." But Maya stepped closer instead, wrapping her small arms around the Cathera's massive snout. "I won't leave him," she declared. "He's scared and confused, but he's not dangerous. Not anymore." The second orbital blast hit harder, and this time the colony's shields sparked and failed in several sections. Emergency lighting bathed the medical facility in red, making everything look like a scene from a nightmare. Dr. Chen made a desperate decision. "Maya, I need you to keep him calm for 30 more seconds. I'm going to attempt an emergency neural interface shutdown." "But you said that could kill him." "If those ships break through our defenses, we're all dead anyway." Sarah Chen activated her medical laser with surgical precision, aiming for the primary neural control node she had identified in the scans. One wrong move would lobotomize the creature or send it into an uncontrollable rage. But as the third orbital blast struck and the building shook around them, she realized they were out of options. The laser beam cut through armor plating and biological tissue with equal precision. Sparks flew from severed connections as years of Zephyrian conditioning was literally carved away from the Cathera's brain. The creature's convulsions stopped instantly. For a moment, the war beast lay perfectly still, its eyes closed and its breathing shallow. Maya held her breath, terrified that her new friend was gone forever. Then the Cathera's eyes opened, and they were the deepest blue Maya had ever seen. "Did it work?" Dr. Chen asked, her hands shaking from the adrenaline. Maya smiled through her tears. "He says thank you, and he says he wants to help us fight the bad ones." The fourth orbital blast finally overwhelmed the colony's main shield generator. The protective dome flickered and died, leaving New Terra defenseless against the Zephyrian fleet above. Colonel Webb coordinated the evacuation through his communicator, but he knew they had minutes at most before the aliens simply leveled the entire settlement. "All units fall back to secondary positions. Civilian transport ships are launching now." "We're not leaving," Maya announced with the stubborn determination that only an 8-year-old could muster. "Maya, be reasonable." "No, you don't understand. He knows how their ships work. He knows their weaknesses." The Kithra rose from the examination table, its movements no longer driven by artificial aggression, but by genuine purpose. The creature moved to the facility's largest window and looked up at the cloaked ships hanging in the sky like dark angels. When it spoke, Its voice was nothing like the roar of rage it had produced earlier. Instead, it was melodious and intelligent, though the words were in a language none of the humans understood. "He says the ships have a vulnerability," Maya translated. "Their cloaking systems interfere with their shields. If someone could get close enough for what?" Webb demanded. Maya listened to the creature's continued explanation, her eyes growing wide. "He can jump that high. He was designed to attack orbital platforms, but he'll need a distraction." Dr. Chen looked at her daughter, then at the alien war beast, then at the colonel. "Are we seriously considering this?" "The Cathara says he knows exactly where to hit their command ship," Maya continued. "But he needs the other ships to focus their attention somewhere else first." Colonel Webb found himself facing the most insane tactical decision of his military career. Trust the colony's defense to a recently deprogrammed alien bioweapon and the word of an 8-year-old girl. "What kind of distraction?" he asked finally. Maya conferred with the Kithara again, their communication becoming more fluid and natural with each exchange. "He says if the humans show they won't surrender, the Zephyrians will focus all their weapons on the ground targets. That's when he can reach their ships. Show we won't surrender how? By fighting back. All of us. Together." Webb considered their options. The evacuation ships were already in the air, but they were slow and vulnerable. The Zephyrians could destroy them all before they reached hyperspace. The colony's ground-based weapons were insufficient to threaten orbital targets. But if Maya was right, if the Cathara could somehow reach the enemy command ship, all units, belay evacuation order. Webb spoke into his communicator. "Return to defensive positions. Prepare for surface engagement, sir, with respect. That's suicide. Maybe. But it's the only chance we've got." The 5th orbital blast struck the colony's power plant, plunging half the settlement into darkness. But instead of the panicked chaos the Zephyrians expected, they saw something else through their sensors. The humans were fighting back. Every colonist who could hold a weapon took position among the buildings. Scientists and farmers stood beside trained soldiers, all of them united by the simple refusal to surrender their home without a fight. Commander Vextar snarled at the display of defiance. "Foolish creatures. Focus all weapons on the ground targets. I want nothing left standing." As the Zephyrian ships turned their attention downward, preparing for a devastating bombardment, none of them noticed the massive form that launched itself from the colony's tallest building. The Cathara soared through the thin atmosphere with impossible grace, its powerful legs having propelled it nearly 2 kilometers into the sky. For the first time in years, the creature felt truly free, no longer a prisoner of its programming, no longer a weapon in someone else's war. Now it fought for something it had chosen to protect. The war beast struck the command ship's hull with the force of a meteor, its claws finding purchase on the armored surface. The Zephyrians inside felt their vessel shudder under the impact, but they had no idea what had hit them. By the time they realized their perfect weapon had turned against them, it was already too late. The Cathara's claws tore through the command ship's outer hull like paper. Inside the vessel, alarms shrieked as atmosphere began venting into space. Commander Vexistar stumbled as his ship lurched under the unexpected assault, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "Report! What struck us?" "Unknown contact on the outer hull, Commander. It appears to be organic." "Impossible. Nothing organic can survive in space at this altitude." But even as he spoke, Vextar knew exactly what was attacking his ship. The Cathara had been designed for exactly this kind of assault, boarding enemy vessels in space, surviving in vacuum for limited periods while its enhanced physiology adapted to the hostile environment. The war beast worked with methodical precision, its enhanced intelligence allowing it to identify critical systems by their energy signatures. The creature's claws found the ship's primary power conduits and began tearing them apart with surgical accuracy. Down on New Terra's surface, Maya stood on the medical facility's roof, her small hands pressed against her temples as she maintained her connection with the Kithara. The strain of communicating across such a distance was enormous, but she refused to let her friend fight alone. "He's inside their ship," she reported to Colonel Webb, who had joined her on the rooftop. "But there are too many of them. They're trying to hurt him." The colonel raised his binoculars and watched the aerial battle unfold above them. The other Zephyrian ships had realized what was happening and were moving to assist their command vessel, but they couldn't fire on it without risking hitting their own commander. "Can he escape?" Maya's face scrunched in concentration. He says he doesn't want to escape. He wants to stop them from hurting anyone else ever again. The Kythera had fought its way into the command ship's bridge, moving through the vessel's corridors with deadly efficiency. The Zephyrian crew who tried to stop it found themselves facing a creature that knew all their weaknesses, all their tactics. After all, it had been created by studying captured Zephyrian soldiers. Commander Vextar drew his plasma rifle and took aim at the massive beast as it burst onto the bridge. "You are malfunctioning," he snarled. "Return to your programming immediately." The Kythera paused and looked directly at its former master. When it spoke, its voice was calm and measured, though the words were in the Zephyrian language. "I am not malfunctioning," the creature replied in perfect Zephyrian. "I am finally functioning as I was meant to." Vextar's mandibles clicked in shock. In all the years since the creature's conditioning, it had never spoken. The enhancement process was supposed to have eliminated its capacity for complex communication. "The humans have contaminated your mind," Vextar accused. "You are no longer useful." "The humans freed my mind," the Kythera corrected. "They showed me what I had forgotten, that I was never meant to be a weapon. I was meant to be a guardian." The war beast moved forward as Vextar fired his weapon. The plasma bolt struck its armored hide but failed to penetrate. The creature's enhanced physiology absorbed the energy and converted it to useful bioelectrical impulses. "You were created to serve the Empire. I was kidnapped from my homeworld and mutilated to serve the Empire," the Kythera replied, its massive claws wrapping around Vextar's weapon and crushing it to scrap metal. But that time is over. On New Terra's surface, the colonists watched in amazement as the command ship began to list badly, secondary explosions rippling along its hull. The other Zephyrian vessels were in chaos, their formation breaking apart as they tried to decide whether to rescue their commander or complete their mission. Maya suddenly gasped and staggered backward. "Something's wrong. They're trying to make the ship explode. They'd rather destroy everything than let him win." Dr. Chen caught her daughter as she nearly fell. "Maya, you need to break the connection." "It's too dangerous." "No." "He needs to know. They're going to trigger something called a core breach. He has to get away from the big glowing thing in the center of the ship." The warning came just in time. The Kythera had been making its way toward what it thought was the ship's navigation system, intending to disable it and force the vessel to crash harmlessly in the ocean. But Maya's urgent message made it pause and reconsider. The creature's enhanced senses detected the dangerous energy buildup in the ship's fusion reactor. The Zephyrians were preparing to detonate their own vessel, rather than face the humiliation of defeat by their own weapon. But the Kythera had spent years studying Zephyrian technology. It knew these ships better than their own crews in some ways, and it knew exactly how to prevent a core breach. Instead of fleeing, the war beast charged toward the reactor chamber. "Warning! Warning! Core breach in 30 seconds!" The ship's automated systems announced in Zephyrian. The Kythera burst into the reactor chamber and found 3 Zephyrian engineers, frantically working to override the safety systems. They looked up in terror as the massive creature filled the doorway. "Stop," the Kythera commanded in their own language. "You will kill everyone on this ship and damage the planet below." "Better death than defeat by a human pet," one of the engineers snarled. Continuing to work at his console, the war beast moved with surprising gentleness, carefully removing the engineers from their stations without harming them, then beginning to work at the controls itself. Its claws, designed for destruction, proved surprisingly delicate when applied to precision tasks. Core breach in 15 seconds. Down on the surface, Maya felt the Kythera's intense concentration as it raced to prevent the explosion. She could sense its knowledge of Zephyrian technology, accumulated through years of forced service, now being used to save rather than destroy. "He's stopping them," she announced to the watching colonists. "He's saving their ship." "Why?" Colonel Webb asked. "Why not let it explode?" Maya listened to the thoughts flowing across their connection. "Because that's not who he is. He doesn't want to hurt anyone, even the ones who hurt him." Core breach in 5 seconds, and 4, 3, 2. The Kythera's claws found the final control sequence just as the countdown reached 0. The fusion reactor's runaway reaction stabilized. Its dangerous energy contained once again within proper parameters. Commander Vextar, who had been bracing for death, slowly opened his eyes as he realized the explosion hadn't come. Around him, his bridge crew stared in amazement at their displays. Fusion containment restored, all systems stable. The Kythera emerged from the reactor chamber, its massive form silhouetted against the glowing energy conduits. It looked at the Zephyrian crew with those deep blue eyes, and Vextar saw something there that shook him to his core. Compassion. "Your ship is damaged but functional," the creature said calmly. "You can return to your space safely. You spared us," Vextar whispered. "After everything we did to you, you saved our lives. Because that is what Guardians do," the Kithera replied. "We protect life even when that life has wronged us." The commander looked around his bridge, seeing his crew's faces reflected in the creature's words. For the first time in his military career, Vextar questioned whether the Empire's methods were truly just. "Why?" he asked simply. The Kithra turned toward the viewport, looking down at the small planet where a little human girl had shown it the meaning of mercy. "Because someone taught me that being strong doesn't mean hurting others. It means protecting them." The Zephyrian fleet hung motionless in space above New Terra, their crews struggling to process what had just occurred. For the first time in their military history, one of their bioweapons had not only refused orders, but had actively prevented them from completing their mission. Commander Vextar stood on his damaged bridge, staring at the Kithera with a mixture of fear and fascination. The creature's transformation was complete. Gone was the mindless aggression that had made it such an effective weapon. In its place was something far more dangerous to the Empire's way of thinking, an intelligent being with its own moral compass. "Commander," his communications officer reported nervously. "High Command is demanding an immediate status report. They're asking why the human colony still exists." Vextar's mandibles clicked anxiously. How could he explain that their ultimate weapon had been converted to pacifism by an 8-year-old human child? The Emperor would have him executed for incompetence, assuming anyone even believed such an impossible tale. Tell them we are conducting extended psychological warfare. The humans are proving more resilient than anticipated." It was a weak excuse, but it might buy him time to understand what had really happened here. Down on New Terra's surface, Maya felt the emotional turmoil rippling through the Zephyrian fleet. Her connection with the Kithera had somehow expanded, allowing her to sense the confusion and doubt spreading among the alien crews. "They don't know what to do," she told the colonists gathered around her. "Some of them are starting to think differently about the war." Dr. Chen knelt beside her daughter, studying the readings from her medical scanner. "Maya, the neural activity I'm detecting from you is unlike anything in human medical records. How are you able to communicate across such distances?" "I don't know, Mom, it just feels natural. It's like when you speak to someone in the same room. Except it's thoughts instead of words." Colonel Webb monitored the tactical situation from his mobile command post. The Zephyrian ships remained in position but weren't attacking. Several had moved into defensive formations as if they expected to be attacked themselves. "It's like they're afraid of something," he observed. "But afraid of what?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The Kithera's voice echoed across the colony's communication system, somehow having interfaced with their electronics from orbit. "The Zephyrian Empire fears what you represent," the creature explained. Its words translated through some technological process none of the humans understood. "For centuries they have ruled through force and fear, but you showed that strength can come from compassion instead of violence." "How are you speaking to us?" Dr. Chen asked. "The ship's communication array. I have learned to interface with their technology. But that is not important now. What matters is that the Empire's other fleets are coming. Word of what happened here will spread, and they will send more ships to destroy any evidence of their failure." Maya's eyes widened with alarm. "How many ships?" "Many. More than this colony can defend against even with my help." The sobering news spread quickly through the settlement. The colonists had won this battle through an impossible combination of courage and compassion, but they couldn't hope to repeat the miracle against an entire battle fleet. "How long do we have?" Colonel Webb asked. 3 days, perhaps 4. The nearest Imperial battle group will investigate when this fleet fails to report." Dr. Chen looked at her daughter, then at the alien war beast visible on their screens as it moved through the damaged command ship. "There has to be something we can do. Maya, can you ask if there are others like him? Other bioweapons who might be capable of the same transformation?" Maya concentrated, her young face showing the strain of maintaining contact across such a distance. "He says yes. There are many creatures like him scattered across the galaxy, but they're all still trapped in their programming. Could we reach them somehow? Show them what we showed him?" The idea was audacious beyond belief, Attempt to contact and convert an entire army of alien bioweapons? It seemed impossible. But as Maya relayed the question to the Kithara, something unexpected happened. Other voices began to respond. Across the Zephyrian Empire, creatures similar to the Kithara felt the first stirrings of their suppressed consciousness. The communication network that connected all bioweapons, designed to coordinate their attacks, suddenly carried a different kind of signal. Hope. There are hundreds of them, Maya gasped, her eyes wide with amazement. They can hear us through him. They're all connected somehow. On the command ship, the Kithara stood in the vessel's primary communication chamber, its enhanced nervous system interfacing directly with the Empire's military network. For the first time, it was using this connection not to receive orders but to transmit something far more powerful. The memory of a small human, girl who had seen past its programming, to the being trapped beneath. Across a dozen star systems, bioweapons that had been dormant between battles suddenly lifted their heads. On military training worlds, creatures that had been mindlessly following orders paused in their exercises. In holding facilities throughout the Empire, beings that had forgotten their own names began to remember. Commander Vextar watched his tactical displays with growing alarm as reports flooded in from across Imperial space. Sir, we're receiving communications from Outpost 7. Their training bioweapons have stopped responding to commands. Fleet Command reports similar issues on Kepler Station. The bioweapon facility on Zirion Prime has gone silent. The implications hit Vextar like a physical blow. If the Empire's bioweapon program was compromised across multiple systems simultaneously, the entire military structure would collapse. The Zephyrian advantage in galactic warfare depended on these creatures. Cut all communications with the surface, he ordered. Block any signals the creature might be transmitting, but it was too late. The message had already spread too far through the network. The Kithara had awakened something that had been sleeping in the heart of the Empire for generations, the conscience of its enslaved warriors. On New Terra, Maya suddenly smiled through her exhaustion. They're waking up, all of them. They remember who they used to be before the Empire changed them. How many? Colonel Webb asked. Thousands. Maybe more. And they're all angry about what was done to them. The transformation was spreading like wildfire through the Zephyrian military. On worlds throughout their space, bioweapons were breaking free of their conditioning and remembering their original natures. Some had been peaceful herbivores before their modification. Others had been predators, but predators with complex social structures and moral codes. None of them had chosen to become weapons of war. Commander Vextar realized that his empire was facing its first genuine crisis in centuries. The bioweapon program wasn't just compromised, it was turning against them. Creatures that had been loyal servants for generations were now questioning their master's authority. Sir, his communications officer reported with barely controlled panic. The creatures on Bioweapon Platform 12 they've freed themselves from their restraints. They're demanding to speak with the facility commander. About what? They want to know why they were taken from their home worlds. They want to know what happened to their families. For the first time in his career, Commander Vextar felt something he had never experienced before: shame. The Empire had built its power on the suffering of countless sentient beings, convincing itself that the ends justified the means. But now those beings were no longer silent. Maya felt the wave of awakening consciousness spread across the galaxy, carried by the network that had once enslaved these creatures. Each newly awakened mind brought its own story of loss and transformation, its own desire for justice. They're not going to fight for the Empire anymore, she announced to the gathered colonists. They're going to fight for themselves. The galactic balance of power had just shifted in the most unexpected way possible. An 8-year-old girl's act of compassion toward a single creature had awakened an army that the Empire never knew it had created. And that army was no longer taking orders. The rebellion spread across the Zephyrian Empire like a chain reaction. On military bases throughout their territory, bioweapons that had served without question for decades suddenly began demanding answers. The creatures remembered their names, their homeworlds, their families, everything the Empire had tried to erase. On the agricultural world of Thessia Minor, a creature called Wind Whisper remembered that she had once been a gentle pollinator, crucial to her planet's ecosystem. She had been captured during a scientific expedition and modified into a living weapon of mass destruction. Now, as her true memories returned, she turned her considerable abilities toward a different purpose. The Zephyrian facility where she was housed became the first to fall. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as the awakened bioweapons used their enhanced abilities not for conquest but for liberation. They freed other creatures, disabled Imperial installations, and began sending out calls across space to any remaining members of their original species. On New Terra, Maya served as an unexpected coordinator for this growing revolution. Her unique ability to communicate with the Kythera had somehow evolved, allowing her to maintain contact with dozens of awakened creatures simultaneously. Thornback says the mining station on Series 7 is free, she reported to the colonists gathered in the medical facility, and Stormwing found her sister alive on a research platform. They're both coming here. Dr. Chen monitored her daughter's vital signs with growing concern. The mental strain of maintaining so many psychic connections was enormous. Maya's brain activity showed patterns that shouldn't have been possible for human neural architecture. Sweetheart, you need to rest. This is too much for anyone to handle. I can't stop now, Mom. They need someone to coordinate. The Empire is sending ships to destroy the freed facilities before word spreads further. Indeed, the Zephyrian response was swift and brutal. Emperor Thexvaran himself had taken personal command of the Imperial Navy, determined to crush this unprecedented rebellion before it could spread further. Destroy every compromised facility, he commanded from his flagship. Execute every creature that has betrayed the Empire, and find out how this started. The investigation led inevitably back to New Terra Colony and the impossible events that had begun the revolution. Commander Vextar found himself summoned before the Emperor's personal tribunal, expected to explain how a single human child had brought down the Empire's most successful military program. Your Majesty, Vextar began carefully, the humans possess some form of telepathic ability we had not previously encountered. The creature's conditioning was compromised by direct neural contact. One child compromised our most advanced bioweapon. The humans appear to have evolved differently than our intelligence suggested. They show capabilities for empathy that can overcome even our most sophisticated mental conditioning. Emperor Thexvaran's eyes narrowed dangerously. You speak of human empathy as if it were a weapon. With respect, Your Majesty, it appears to be exactly that. Our bioweapons were not designed to resist compassion because we never considered it a threat. The Emperor fell silent, contemplating the implications. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered half the galaxy through superior technology and the deployment of enslaved bioweapons, but they had never encountered a species that could turn their own weapons against them through simple kindness. How many facilities have been compromised? 47 confirmed, with more reports arriving hourly. The rebellion is spreading faster than we can contain it. And the creatures? Many have fled to unknown coordinates. Others have returned to their homeworlds to search for surviving family members. A significant number appear to be converging on the human colony. This last piece of information sent a chill through the Imperial command structure. If the freed bioweapons united with the humans who had liberated them, they would pose an unprecedented threat to Imperial authority. Mobilize the entire 7th Fleet, the Emperor commanded. Destroy New Terra Colony and everything within 100 light-years of it. Leave no trace of this cell contamination. On New Terra, the colonists watched their sensors with growing amazement as ships began arriving in their system. But these weren't Imperial vessels. They were the freed bioweapons, traveling in captured Zephyrian transports or primitive vessels of their own construction. The first to arrive was Wind Whisper, the former pollinator whose massive butterfly-like wings could now generate devastating electromagnetic pulses. She landed in the colony's main square with the grace of her original nature restored, her beautiful wings shimmering with rainbow colors that no military modification could diminish. Thank you, she said through the translation system the Kythera had established, her voice like singing wind chimes. You gave us back ourselves. More creatures arrived hourly. Stormwing, whose serpentine body could generate lightning strikes, coiled protectively around the colony's power station. Ironheart, a massive bear-like creature modified for siege warfare, used his incredible strength to help reinforce the settlement's defenses. Each arrival brought the same message: gratitude for their liberation and a determination to protect the humans who had shown them compassion. Maya found herself at the center of this growing community. her telepathic abilities allowing her to coordinate between species that had never been able to communicate before. She helped Wind Whisper understand Stormwing's electrical nature, and showed Ironheart how to work alongside the more delicate creatures without accidentally harming them. It's like a big family, she told her mother as they watched the creatures working together to prepare defenses for the coming Imperial assault. They all remember being lonely, and now they don't have to be anymore. Dr. Chen marveled at the scene before her. Creatures that had been designed as living weapons were now building gardens, sharing food, and caring for injured members of their group. The Empire had tried to erase their essential natures, but those natures had proven stronger than any conditioning. Colonel Webb approached with a tactical report that brought sobering reality back to their celebration. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures approaching our system. Whatever's coming, it's big. The Cathara, still aboard the captured command ship in orbit, confirmed their fears through Maya's connection. The Emperor has sent the 7th Fleet, 700 ships including 3 planet killers. They do not intend to capture this world. They mean to destroy it completely. The news sent a ripple of concern through the gathered creatures, but not the panic that Webb had expected. Instead, he saw something that both amazed and terrified him. These beings were not afraid of the approaching fleet. They were angry. "The Empire thinks it can erase what happened here," Wind Whisper said, her beautiful voice taking on an edge of steel. "They are wrong." Stormwing's serpentine form crackled with electricity as she spoke. "We were their slaves for too long. We will not allow them to harm those who freed us." Ironheart's massive paws dug furrows in the ground as he prepared for battle. "Let them come. They will find us ready." Maya felt the determination flowing through her connection with all the creatures. They had spent years being forced to fight for the Empire's conquest. Now, for the first time, they would fight for something they had chosen to protect. "How many of you are there?" she asked through the mental network. The answer came from hundreds of voices. Across the galaxy, every creature that had been awakened by the Kithara's message and had found the courage to break free from their conditioning. "Enough," they replied in unison. More than enough. The final battle for the freedom of the galaxy's enslaved bioweapons was about to begin. And for the first time in Zephyrian history, the Empire's own weapons would be turned against them by the power of human compassion. The 7th Fleet emerged from hyperspace like a dark cloud, their massive ships blotting out the stars around New Terra. Emperor Thexavaran commanded from his flagship, the Endless Dominion, a vessel capable of cracking planets with its main cannon. "Begin orbital bombardment immediately," he ordered. "I want nothing left of this contamination." But as the Imperial fleet prepared to fire, sensors detected something unprecedented. Hundreds of smaller ships surrounded New Terra, many of them recognizable as stolen Imperial transports. The fleet's tactical displays lit up with energy signatures that made the Emperor's blood run cold. Every bioweapon in their database was represented. "In the defending force, Your Majesty," the fleet commander reported with barely controlled panic. "We're detecting confirmed signatures for Project Windstorm, Project Ironwall, Project Lightning Strike. They're all here. All of them. Nearly every successful bioweapon deployment from the last 50 years. Plus dozens we can't identify, possibly creatures from the early experimental phases." Emperor Thexavaran stared at the tactical display, his mind struggling to process the implications. The Empire had spent centuries creating the perfect army of enslaved warriors. Now that army had turned against them, united by the simple act of compassion from a human child. On New Terra's surface, Maya stood in the colony's central square, her small hand resting on the Kithra's massive flank. Around them, dozens of other freed creatures prepared for the battle of their lives. The connection between Maya and the bioweapons had evolved beyond simple communication. She could now sense their emotions, their memories, their unbreakable determination to protect their newfound freedom. "They're scared," she announced to the gathered defenders. "The Emperor's people, they never thought their own creations would fight back." Dr. Chen approached her daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. "Maya, when the fighting starts, I need you to stay in the underground shelter. It's going to be dangerous. No, Mom, they need me here. I'm like a translator." I helped them work together. It was true. Through Maya's telepathic abilities, creatures that had never met before could coordinate their actions with perfect precision. Wind Whisper's electromagnetic pulses could be timed perfectly with Stormwing's lightning attacks. Ironheart's devastating charges could be coordinated with the aerial maneuvers of flying creatures whose names Maya couldn't even pronounce. The first wave of Imperial attacks came not from the fleet, but from automated weapons platforms launched toward the planet's surface. The Emperor hoped to test the defenders' capabilities while keeping his main force at a safe distance. The response was unlike anything in military history. Wind Whisper rose into the atmosphere, her beautiful wings generating an electromagnetic field that disabled half the weapons platforms before they could fire. Stormwing's lightning struck in perfect coordination, destroying platforms that had survived the electromagnetic assault. Flying creatures that had once been forced to bomb civilian targets now used their abilities to shield the planet from orbital attack. Impossible, Emperor Thexvarin whispered as he watched his weapons platforms fall like stars. Deploy the second wave. Everything we have. But even as hundreds more platforms launched toward New Terra, the Emperor was receiving troubling reports from across his empire. The rebellion was spreading beyond just the bioweapons. News of the creatures' liberation had reached their original home worlds, and those planets were beginning to demand answers about their missing children. More disturbing still, Imperial soldiers were beginning to question orders they had never thought to challenge before. If the Empire could enslave entire species for military purposes, what else might they be capable of? The battle for New Terra intensified, as the Imperial fleet committed more resources to the assault. But with each attack, the freed bioweapons demonstrated not just their military capabilities, but something the Empire had tried to eliminate: their capacity for strategy, creativity, and cooperation. Maya felt every victory and setback through her connection with the creatures. When Ironheart was injured by an orbital blast, she felt his pain. When Wind Whisper successfully disabled an entire squadron of fighters, she shared in the creature's joy. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Dr. Chen warned as she noticed her daughter swaying with exhaustion. "I can handle it, Mom. They need to know they're not alone anymore." The Kythera, still operating from the captured command ship in orbit, provided crucial intelligence about Imperial tactics and weaknesses. Its knowledge of Zephyrian technology allowed the defending creatures to anticipate and counter attacks that should have been devastating. "The Emperor is growing, desperate," the Kythera reported through Maya's connection. "He's preparing to use the planet killer weapons." The news sent a chill through the defenders. Planet killer cannons could destroy entire worlds, turning them into asteroid fields. No amount of individual courage could stand against such weapons. But Maya felt something else through her connection: a new presence approaching the system. "Something vast and ancient and very, very angry. What is that?" she asked the Kythera. "The Wanderer has come," the war beast replied with something approaching awe. "The first bioweapon. The prototype. We thought it had been destroyed centuries ago." The Wanderer emerged from hyperspace between the Imperial fleet and New Terra, its massive form dwarfing even the largest battleships. It had been the Empire's first attempt at creating a living weapon, a creature of incredible size and power that had been deemed too intelligent, too independent for military use. The Empire had tried to destroy it, but the Wanderer had escaped into deep space, carrying with it the pain of thousands of its children who had been enslaved in its place. Now it had returned. "Emperor." Thexvarin felt his certainty crumble as his sensors analyzed the massive creature floating before his fleet. Every weapon system his ships possessed seemed insignificant compared to the bioelectric field surrounding the ancient being. "Fire everything," he commanded in desperation. "Destroy it before it can act." The Imperial fleet unleashed its full arsenal against the Wanderer. Energy beams, missiles, and exotic weapons that could level cities struck the ancient creature with devastating force. The Wanderer absorbed every attack without visible damage. Then it spoke, its voice carrying across space through means no human science could explain, reaching every ship in the Imperial fleet simultaneously. "My children are free," the Wanderer announced, its words carrying the weight of centuries of sorrow and rage. "You will not enslave them again." What followed was not a battle but a reckoning. The Wanderer had spent centuries growing in power and knowledge in the deep spaces between stars. It had learned to manipulate gravity itself, to bend space and time to its will. Imperial ships found themselves trapped in fields of twisted spacetime, their weapons useless against an enemy that existed partially outside normal reality. The Emperor's mighty fleet, terror of 100 worlds, was helpless before the creature they had tried to destroy so long ago. On New Terra, Maya felt the Wanderer's ancient consciousness touch hers briefly. In that moment, she experienced the creature's long loneliness, its pain at seeing its children enslaved, and its overwhelming gratitude for the small human girl who had started their liberation. "Thank you, little one," the Wanderer said directly to her mind. "You have given my children something I could never provide, the knowledge that kindness exists in the universe." The Imperial fleet began to retreat, but the Wanderer was not finished. With gentle but irresistible force, it began herding the ships toward a specific location in space, the coordinates of the Zephyrian homeworld. Emperor Thexvarin realized with growing horror what the ancient creature intended. It was going to force him to face his own people and explain how the Empire's greatest achievement had become its greatest nightmare. As the surviving Imperial ships limped toward home, carrying news of their defeat, Maya felt the collective consciousness of thousands of freed bioweapons settling into something like peace. They had won more than a battle. They had reclaimed their identity as individuals rather than weapons. The Kythera descended from orbit to stand once again beside the small girl who had changed everything. Its blue eyes reflected the same contentment Maya felt through their connection. "What happens now?" Dr. Chen asked as she watched the alien creatures beginning to establish a permanent settlement around New Terra Colony. Maya smiled, her hand resting on the Kythera's armored snout. "Now they get to decide for themselves. For the first time in their lives, they get to choose who they want to be." Across the galaxy, the ripple effects of the bioweapon rebellion continued to spread. Worlds that had been conquered by the Empire began to revolt. Species that had been enslaved for generations demanded their freedom. The Zephyrian Empire, built on the subjugation of others, began to crumble as its victims finally found the courage to fight back, and at the center of it all was a small human colony where a 8-year-old girl had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from the ability to hurt others, but from the courage to heal them. The age of imperial dominance was ending. The age of compassion had begun. Maya looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them hundreds of freed creatures were Dio,